In 1996, Kobe Bryant was drafted into the NBA 13th overall, and we all know how his legendary career went, but what happened to the 12 players drafted before him? Where are they at now, and how did their careers end up after getting drafted ahead of one of the greatest players of all time? Well, let's find out. Now, first off, I will say that Kobe Bryant was coming into the league out of high school, so that might have factored into the 12 teams' decisions to pass up on him, so we can kind of keep that in mind. But the first overall pick that year was Allen Iverson, who made a name for himself nationwide in high school and college, and everyone agreed that he deserved to go first overall. And he did, then had a historic career with the Philadelphia 76ers, where in his rookie season he proved himself as a player, and then later on became one of the greatest scorers the game has ever seen. His crossover and athleticism while only being 6 feet made him nearly impossible to defend. So they had that finals run, and he's gone down in history as one of the greatest players to never win a championship. And even though his career fell off pretty early thanks to his ego and personal issues, for a lot of people that doesn't really take away from how good AI actually was. Camby went 2nd overall that year, and after 3 great years at UMass, where he became one of their greatest players and athletes ever, he earned the opportunity to get drafted 2nd overall that year. And even though he's remembered by NBA fans for his days on the Knicks and the Nuggets, Camby never actually even made an NBA All-Star team, and that's unfortunate based on everyone who was drafted around him. But on the Knicks, he started to become a premier player, and that prepared him for his upcoming role in the Nuggets, where he played alongside Carmelo Anthony and his former draft mate Allen Iverson for a short period of time. The team was great, and Camby played a huge part in that as their defensive anchor, and throughout his time there, he led the NBA in multiple different categories for multiple different seasons. But when the Nuggets eventually broke up, he was passed around to a few different teams before eventually retiring. Then Shareef Abdur-Rahim was drafted 3rd, and Raheem was a good player. He averaged 20 a game throughout most of his prime and came in and helped teams right away. He was a much better draft pick for Memphis, seeing how they just drafted Bryant Reeves 6th overall the previous year, which was their first ever pick as a team. So that was a plus. But with the team being so new and not having much talent, they weren't great, and it seemed like Shareef would have been a much better 2nd or 3rd option, but he never really got that opportunity. When he played for the Hawks, things looked good when he became a first-time All-Star, but it ended up being the only time, and he never made the playoffs until he was on the verge of retirement with the Kings. So while in hindsight, drafting Kobe Bryant would have been the perfect move for Memphis, it makes sense why a brand new team wouldn't have wanted to take a risk like that. The next pick in 96 was Stefan Marbury, who was picked by the Bucks, then traded one spot down to the Wolves for Ray Allen, which had to hurt. But Stefan always had a complicated legacy. He was such a talented player even early on, but his attitude always got in the way. It hurt his reputation, hurt his performance on the court, and some people even believe it eventually led to him being kicked out of the NBA. He made an impact on a lot of different teams, but he forced his way off the Timberwolves, only played 2 years on the Nets even though he became an All-Star, and the same for the Phoenix Suns before he wound up on the Knicks. And from there on out, things kinda blew up and everyone started to turn on him. He got his first head coach Larry Brown fired, so Isaiah Thomas was hired, and he started having problems with him too, and it all became public. At one point on the team plane, Thomas told Marbury that he was planning on taking him out of the starting lineup, so Stefan threatened to blackmail him if he did so in front of the whole team. And eventually the Knicks just straight up banned Marbury from showing up for practices or games. Then he found his way to playing pro ball in China, where he became a superstar for the next decade, having just recently retired a couple of years ago, and he's been head coaching ever since. Now, as we mentioned, Ray Allen was taken next, and his career was a little more straightforward. On his own, he became a star on the Bucks and Supersonics, then he joined up with the Celtics to create a super team, then went to the Heat to make an even bigger one. And him leaving Boston to join Miami caused friction between himself and his old teammates for years. Paul Pierce forgave him early on, but it was nice to finally see them come back together and make up at Kevin Garnett's jersey retirement. After getting taken 6th though, Ray Allen definitely became one of the most memorable players from this year's draft, cementing his name as the best 3-point shooter of all time, at least until Steph Curry came around. But him having that title lasted a pretty good stretch, and for him to have had that and be a crucial part of 2 championship teams, well, you could say easily he was a steal at the spot. With the 6th pick, the Boston Celtics picked Antoine Walker out of Kentucky, and this is notable because from pictures you may have seen, Kobe Bryant actually had workouts with the Boston Celtics before the draft, but apparently they just chose not to pick him. Then went with Walker instead, who was coming out of 2 years in college, but it didn't pay off. He came into the league and instantly became a pretty good duo with Paul Pierce. He was a 20-point per game scorer, and they made the playoffs a couple of times, but when he got traded off the Celtics after 7 seasons, that was pretty much the end of his career. Over the next 5 seasons, he bounced around 5 different teams before leaving to play overseas and for the G League. Then he just straight up retired, so it was nothing near the career Kobe Bryant had. With the 7th pick, you start to get to the guys that just make you wonder how they went ahead of Kobe. And Lorenzen Wright went 7th to the Clippers, which is another notable one because Kobe apparently worked out for the Clippers, and they told him that they would love to draft him, but they didn't want to deal with the fans' backlash for drafting a 17-year-old. And now that one didn't really work out for them, especially since Lorenzen Wright never became anything more than a role player in the NBA and only played on the Clippers for 3 seasons. Now keep in mind, any one of these teams could have had Kobe Bryant at any point, but instead the Nets then chose Kerry Kittles. I guess it makes sense, he had just been a dominant player at Villanova and was the second ranked player in the nation at one point, while also being a 6'5" shooting guard, so he probably seemed like the safer choice. But it didn't pay off, especially since Kerry only ended up having a 9-year NBA career. He was a solid role player for New Jersey in that time, but again, he was only a role player. Now, drafting Samaki Walker 9th overall really didn't work out for the Dallas Mavericks because he was a power forward, and not only did he only play 3 seasons for Dallas, but he never played more than 40 games in a season and barely ever started a game. Then he got traded away because the Mavs drafted Dirk just 3 years later, pretty much making the 1996 pick useless. But just imagine they drafted Kobe that year, then still got Dirk. Now, that would have been a duo that we would have paid to see. But Samaki spent the rest of his years after Dallas as a bench player on contending teams, and ironically won a championship in 2002 on the back of Kobe Bryant. Eric Dampier was next, and he was drafted so high thanks to helping his team to the Final Four of the NCAA tournament. But again, he was another guy that really didn't do anything in the NBA except leave the Indiana Pacers with regret still to this day. Sure, he had a 15-year career, but really wasn't a major factor on any team. Now, if you look back in the history books, a man named Todd Fuller was drafted next, and his career is even less impressive, and in fact was the least impressive out of anyone so far in this video. But Golden State picked him, and he went on to only have a 5-year NBA career. The player drafted one spot ahead of Kobe was a guy named Vitaly Potapenko, who I was surprised to find out actually played 10 years in the NBA because, well, I've never heard of him. And he was actually the first overseas player drafted that night. It just looks so bad looking back to see that a team willingly chose to draft Vitaly Potapenko over a second-generation Kobe Bryant. So then, of course, next Kobe was drafted, and even though the Hornets were the only ones to actually pick him, they look worse than all of those 12 other teams combined because they actually had him in their possession, but traded him to the Lakers for Vlade Divac. Looking back, it's easy to say, well, I guess it makes sense that they didn't draft Kobe since he was only 17 coming out of high school, and if it was any other player in NBA history, I would agree. But since it was Kobe, any team that worked out with him or spoke to him before the draft should have known better, due to the fact that he had been scrimmaging with grown NBA players for years at this point, and that during the Lakers workout, he played in one-on-ones against Larry Drew and Michael Cooper and destroyed both of them. So yeah, that should have been a pretty good sign. And as we know, Kobe would then go on to have a better career than every single person drafted that night, playing for the Lakers for 20 years and becoming one of the greatest and most iconic NBA players of all time. And it is weird though, because right after Kobe was drafted, all the greats started getting drafted. Peja Stojakovic went next, then Steve Nash, shortly followed by Jermaine O'Neal, and then Derek Fisher. There was a lot of talent from 1996, but a lot of it went right after Kobe, which made things pretty weird. Overall though, that's how 12 players were drafted ahead of Kobe Bryant. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to click the one on the screen because I'm sure you're going to enjoy that one just as much.